Time to go? Okay. My topic is on economic cycles and entrepreneurship. And this is a little bit off the wall or a little bit offbeat, but I was kind of interested and intrigued by some of the concepts we talked about in here versus some of the concepts we talk about, say, we had securities analysis class, where we're talking about long wave cycles, population growth, population declines, that sort of thing, and how those activities or actions are tied into innovations in entrepreneurship. We've referenced in here quite a lot the Industrial Revolution and some of the things that went on with that, and it just really intrigued me, and I wanted to look at it a little bit more. If I were to choose again, I don't know if I would for sure, but at this point in time, it's what we have, so here we go. Now, I kind of have a question for the group. In your everyday life and what you hear in the news, reading the newspaper, that sort of thing, where are the economic cycles? Do we talk about them? Do we recognize them as relevant? It seems to me that a lot of what I hear is a pitch for a constant growth model. You know, we talk about GDP. It's 2% greater this year than it was last year. Growth in my company, we grew by 10%. We expect to grow by 10% every year. Now, my question again for the group is, what happens when you have a model like that? Over the long term, does those types of functions or those types of actions, do you think that they are based in reality? Because, I mean, you have time. Over time, if something grows by 10% a year, does this? You know, this is the basis of our someone selling us their services and managing our 401k funds. You know, you're going to be rich in 65 years because you're going to grow at 7 or 10% a year. So I kind of personally see some relevance to at least paying a little bit attention to the concept of cycles and the idea that while things may trend in a general direction, they may not always be actually going up at that point in time. So that's kind of where this interest comes from. That and a personal fascination with, this is my reading book at work. This is on my desk all the time, just when I get bored. And it's a short history of technology. It's extremely dry. But it talks about who created what and when, and some of the little challenges they had involved in those activities. So we're going to talk a little bit about the business cycle. 7 to 9 years. Typically advertised, talked about. I mean, has anyone had a class where you've actually talked about the business cycle? Interesting. You know, maybe business concepts like that don't blend well with. Well, that selling something or pure academics or pure, I guess I don't know what I'm looking for there anyway. Intermediate term cycles, where some people have tried to formulate or attribute meaning to 20, 30-year cycles, things like that. We'll kind of gloss over that. And then the long wave Kondratiev cycles, 57 plus years. Basically, we're looking at something the length of a generation. And okay. Now, when we talk about a cycle, and I'll use the word cycle and wave interchangeably when I speak, we have generally what they look at as a prosperity phase, a recession phase, a depression, and a recovery. If we were to look at this graph over here, we actually have two different waves. Wait, these are actual sinusoidal waves. But if we look at, say, from here, this midpoint here to the top, you can think of that as prosperity. When you turn the corner and start heading down, depression. It gets really bad, depression. And then when you start turning and heading up again, recovery. Now, right now in the news, we're hearing about, well, this is the worst recession since the Great Depression. That's a popular topic. You know, I don't know. Later on, we'll get to a point where We have a gentleman who actually tried to map out some of these Kondratiev long wave cycles and attribute them to specific periods in time. And it'll be interesting to see what you think when we get there. The definition of the business cycle, the expansion and contraction of the economy as a whole. I pulled that out of a book, Understanding Wall Street. I'm not sure I really agree with that definition. There can probably be a better one to be had when it comes time for the paper. But we'll work with it from there. Now, our favorite, Schumpeter, wrote in his 39-work business cycles, and he talked about when, and as we've discussed in class, when you're studying economic systems, he said you need to go beyond cataloging accidental events and analyze the features that generate fluctuations. And these innovations that occur within a society or an industry are the main engine of growth. And we're going to associate those innovations that are occurring with entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship for the most part. Not necessarily all the time, but these big major steps and leaps forward, we'll try and make that association. So we've talked about the British Industrial Revolution. And in his work, Schumpeter categorized this or viewed this as the first long wave cycle that he talks about. And I actually have here a book I got. I'm going to read a short passage out of it. I don't have any YouTube videos, but we'll work with this. And I actually got this from a guy I met in a bar one night, if you believe that. But we got to talking about economics, and he had some reading material, and he gave it to me, and I got this big stack of books. But this is actually Schumpeter, and he says, railroad construction in its earlier stages, electrical power production before the First World War, steam and steel, the motor car, colonial adventures afford spectacular instances of a large genius which comprises innumerable humbler ones, down to such things as making a success of a particular kind of sausage or toothbrush. This kind of activity is primarily responsible for the recurrent prosperities that revolutionize the economic organism and the recurrent recessions that are due to the impact of the new products or methods. So, in that little passage, we talk about waves, cycles, booms, busts. Creative destruction there at the end. You know, if we recognize it for what it was. And